Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Stephen Cangiano. This is RDT TV with its online companions, relationship-development.com and humanity-upgrade.com. Today, it is my pleasure to bring from England one of our thought leaders and authors, Marilyn Menzies. I'm gonna do a brief introduction here, and then we're gonna hear from her over the next 25 to 30 minutes. You're gonna love what you have to hear today. Having received her first rejection slip at the age of 14, Mel Menzies, pronounced Menzies, it's actually spelled Menzies. That's why could be some confusion. Went on to receive offers from various major publishers, one of which, published by Holder and Stoughton, became a Sunday Times #4 bestseller. A multi-published author under various pen names since 1983, her books, fiction and nonfiction, plus numerous articles, cover a broad swath of topics, most of which she has experienced in her own life: a disastrous marriage, debt, divorce, drug-addicted daughter, and her subsequent death. Happily, Marilyn not only survived, but thrived. Twice a wife, 3 times a mother, and 7 times a grandmother, her aim is always to offer resources to inform, inspire, and encourage. Her novel, Time to Shine, the first of a series, became an Amazon #1 bestseller in its category, followed by Chosen. These gentle psychological mysteries set in Exeter and Dartmouth are solved not by police procedures, but by a quirky counselor named Evie Adams, and are available from any good bookshop. Her next book, subtitled Feeling Useless or Unheard, Don't, You Are, and the title Pick for a Purpose, is a memoir with helpful reflections at the end of each chapter. Dedicated to the Prince's Trust, Prince Charles's charity, her hope is that it will help young people, cited as the manuscript for our generation, to fulfill their potential. Marilyn, is there anything else you want to add to that introduction before we get started?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Very good, very good. Well, as I've read through a lot of your content, you're very, very open about your life and about the challenges you faced and how you've overcome those challenges. Let's start. Where would you like to start? I mean, there's so much here to go, and I just kind of like, where would you like to start? Tell us briefly what your story.
Well, I was brought up as the eldest of 3 girls. I was brought up with a British stiff upper lip, and you zipped. You never spoke about anything that was meant to be private. And by the time I left home, I think I'd realized that, and things started going wrong for me because I married very young with a baby on the way. And I then had 15 years of a very unhappy marriage. And I began to realize when my marriage broke down that I'd become a Christian, and that I felt that I was being told, this is a quote from scripture, to comfort others with the comfort that I had received. And so, having had my first, as you said, my first attempt rejected as a 14-year-old, I started writing again as in my 20s, and took it from there. So
I see. So good. Basically, writing is how did that change your life? This bad marriage and being a very young mother, how did it change your life? And then if we could follow up, it seemed like the writing and expressing your experiences was cathartic for you. Is that accurate, or how does that play out for you?
yes. Yes, people say it's cathartic. I suppose it probably was. But I think it was I think it was a sense of helping other people that really not encouraged me, inspired me, I suppose. Because later on I trained in counselling, although in those days you didn't have to be qualified in counselling, so I'm not a qualified counsellor, but I did some training in counselling. And I was on a team which helped other people. And I think it was that sense of wanting to help other people. And of course, I spent 6 years living on my own as a single parent when my marriage did break up. My parents were very helpful during that time, but obviously it had a bad effect on my girls. And I'm more and more convinced that broken homes are the reason why we now have, I think we have more knife crime in London than you have in New York.
I hope not.
So, well, it's pretty bad. And I think an awful lot of this is because of broken relationships. I mean, it isn't even marriage now. A lot of the time it's just living together and then moving on to the next one. And so I know when when I started writing and before the days of the internet, and I had letters from all over the world from people saying to me, "You have no idea how this has helped me. How encouraging it's been just to hear that somebody else has gone through what I've gone through."
So, okay, good. Let's get into that a little bit deeper. What do you think? What are the most important lessons you learned? How can these lessons help other people?
Well, I think I would say that the most lessons I learned have really been from my second marriage, which happened 6 years after the first one broke up. And my husband and I did a marriage enrichment course, and we used to we trained and we used to run courses for other people. And I think the things that I've learned about a good relationship are one thing is daily sharing, which we do. We do it as what we would call a quiet time, so that involves Bible reading and prayer, but it doesn't have to be that. But during that, whatever we've read in the Bible, in our Bible notes, then we would use to discuss things from our past. So perhaps something from our childhood that we hadn't come up in conversation before, or something from our adolescence that hadn't come up in conversation before. Or we might discuss something, I don't know, a meeting we've had with friends or something, and our opinion about their views on something. And it's just setting aside that time each day to have a time that's just the two of you to share together. But I think also, I think there's a great need to show affection. And also to have fun. We have what we call our kitchen cuddles and our hugs in the hall. And I think it's very important to develop that. It's very easy to let that go when marriage becomes stale. And I think the third thing I would say is having time on your own, because my husband and I also ran a singles group, and we used to say to people, this is not a dating club, it's just a chance for single people to get to know other single people. But we had 8 marriages come out of it, very happy ones. And what we used to say to people is we always refer to our spouse as the other half, my other half this, my other half that. But actually, you need to be a whole person. And to do that, you need to have time in your life when you do things separately. And this was part of the marriage enrichment course, that you need to, as well as doing things together, you need to have time separately so that you fulfill your requirements in life, your activities in life, which may differ from your spouse, and so that you have something new to bring back into conversation so it doesn't become stale.
Interesting. So if we could just focus on that for a second, because that's come up with many of our relationship authors, and it's really about a lot of people approach, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people approach the relationship, well, I'm incomplete and I need to be complete. And that you're going to, that
Yeah,
terrible line in the movie, you complete me, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Great movie, terrible line. Talk about that a little bit. Like, because a lot of people have that concept, like I'm incomplete, I need someone to, I think that's very, can be damaging to a relationship. I'd like to hear your opinion.
I think it can be very damaging to a relationship, and this is why, as I say, when we were running our singles group, we would always say to people, you need to be whole. And that means that you need to know yourself, you need to accept yourself, and you need to love yourself. And I think this is something, particularly as British people, we find very difficult to do. We think it's that we should be thinking of other people. I mean, I'm at the moment thinking quite a lot about people pleasing, and I think one needs to learn how to say no so that you can be a whole person. If you cannot do something, you shouldn't feel that you have to be dragged into it. I think you need to be able to and express an opinion without feeling that you should always go along with your spouse or with the others who are there. You should feel safe enough to do that without being aggressive. And I think you need also, as I say, to have time to pursue your own activities.
So yeah. So you have to be, you're saying be your own person. Now, one thing you mentioned in there is, and this is up for a lot of people, this concept of loving yourself. And there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. So we could spend 2 hours on loving yourself. Just give me, some pearls of wisdom on how people can overcome that feeling like they don't love themselves, or I want to love myself. What would you what would you say? What would you say to somebody who says, I just don't love myself. I hate, that kind of thing. What would you say to them?
Well, I think one of the big things is body image. And I grew up with my mother. I had my middle sister was a redhead with very curly hair, and everybody said what a pretty little girl she was. Well, this was when I was a very little girl, and I used to say to my mother, "Am I pretty as well?" And she'd say, "Oh no, you've got mousy hair and sallow skin." And
No.
she would be joking about it, but I looked like Daddy, and my sister looked more like her side of the family. And she would tell me I had to pinch my nose to make it slimmer. And then I remember when I went to school, I had to play the part of Bottom in a Shakespeare play, and everybody teased me about my thighs. So I think body image has a big part to play, particularly I think for women. And one of the stories I tell in my next upcoming book is that my mother made me a birthday cake when I was 13 and told me to cut it into pieces for my party friends. And out of the middle, I drew this horrible, soggy chunk of greaseproof paper. And I was so embarrassed, 13, you can imagine. And she said, "Well, open it up." And inside was this beautiful, delicate little uh, cross and chain, which my father had bought for me when I was born. And years later, I thought, it isn't what's on the outside that matters, it's what's on the inside. And if we can show love and justice and fairness to other people, then I think we have everything there to love ourselves, because we're making the world a better place, aren't we? We're shedding light in a dark world.
Beautiful. Yeah. So if I could sum that up, if you want to feel loved, you have to give love.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's in your. All right. Now I want to move on because I want to get to a couple of things here. Tell me about Picked for a Purpose.
Picked for a Purpose, my publisher asked me to write my memoirs, which I have done many years ago, but in separate books. And I started and I got well into it. And then my mother fell ill, and she died a year ago, actually, a year ago this month. And I suddenly thought, this isn't quite how I want to do it. So at the end of each chapter, I added a reflection. So I'm looking back on my life, hence the story I've just told you about the beautiful little cross and chain inside that soggy chunk of greaseproof paper. And it's looking back on the things that I've learned from life. And I was watching the news on the TV one day, and something came up about the Prince's Trust. In the past, I've always dedicated my royalties and my proceeds from sales of my books to charities, and I suddenly thought, this is the one for this book, because I hope that there is stuff in there content in there that will speak to people, young people. When I say young people, it goes up to young adults. And that's what the charity covers.
So it's really for the really hoping to inspire the young people, the younger generation to learn from the experiences of your life.
Yes, it is. And to learn to love themselves, to learn to love others, to be whole people, and yes, to fulfill their potential.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. All right, in a lot of your content and articles, you actually very openly talk about your daughter who became drug addicted, and then
Yes.
yeah, maybe you can, and then actually, I think overdosed or committed suicide. Can you? And you're very open about that. Can you share? I mean, if it's okay, would you mind sharing that as you have before and giving us some insights into that experience?
Yes, I my she was my middle daughter, and she was, oh, I can't remember now, quite young when my marriage broke up. And I think being the middle child of three girls is difficult anyway, probably. Or I have looked at something I've looked into and written articles about eldest child, middle child, youngest child. But she got mixed up. She was at boarding school, and her father was a wealthy businessman. So this was not about poverty or anything like that. But she started smoking at boarding school, and she was suspended. And there was a question mark over whether this was tobacco or cannabis. We never found out. But she then became involved with a gang of youths, one of whom, again, was from a wealthy family, a doctor's son. I don't know whether they'd split up, but they were all motorbikers. And Vicky, my daughter, became involved with them. They were later convicted of the gang rape of a girl on a beach. But she went on then she left home eventually at 16, and she went on and started on heroin, well, on cannabis really, and then eventually on to heroin by the time she was 20. And she begged us to help her, and we helped her to come off 3 times, but each time that she went back to the life that she knew. And eventually, she came back again, and she asked for more help. And I realized that we had to tell her that she had to take responsibility for herself. I told her, I told my husband, who was her stepfather, and we wept together about it, but I said it just had to be done. I knew it somewhere deep down inside me. And I told her that we loved her, that we would never stop loving her, but that she had to take responsibility for herself. Well, in the meantime, my eldest daughter had married a farmer, and she was expecting her first baby, and she was told not to go near pregnant ewes because you can start what's called an anthusic abortion, a miscarriage. And so Vicky, my middle daughter, had loved farming and helping with lambing when she was a little girl. So my eldest daughter had asked her to come up and help, which Vicky did. There were no drugs anywhere near the farm, and so she detoxed by cold. I can't think what the phrase is, but she just couldn't get hold of drugs. And she went back to London to see all her friends afterwards, and she said her eyes were opened and she realized they were all zombies, and she never went back on drugs again. 5 years later, after she'd put herself through college and settled down and had a baby, someone dropped a pill, in a morphine tablet, a stolen morphine tablet, into her drink at a party, and she asphyxiated and died.
Oh my
So it
God.
wasn't.
So
It
I'm
wasn't.
sorry. I'm sorry. So maybe I misunderstood. So she, so basically, she became addicted to drugs at 16, and then 3 times you, I guess, helped her get through rehab. Is that correct? And
Yeah,
then the fourth time, you said you have to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility. And part of her rehabilitation was on her sister's farm, because her sister
yeah,
couldn't be around the sheep because they can actually initiate a miscarriage.
yeah.
And then with that experience, she went, I think you were looking for maybe the term cold turkey. She just went off
That's
and
right.
yeah.
Yes,
Cold turkey. And so then, um, so basically she went back, saw how really, what a horrible life her friends were living in that drug culture, and went back to school, got her life in order. And 5 years
yeah,
later, somebody literally poisoned her at a party. Do I have that
yeah,
right? Oh, that
yes.
is that is horrible. How did you deal with that?
Well, yeah, how did we indeed? Um, First of all, I'd just like to say that you hit the nail on the head there by saying about rehab, because I do think that it's no good just trying to get somebody off an addiction. You have to fill the space. And farming, lambing was what did it for Vicky. Uh, when when all this happened, there was obviously a post-mortem, and I was told I would not be allowed to speak at the post-mortem. So her father, from whom I've been divorced for many years, as I've said, was told that he had to look into it, and we were told that the verdict was going to be death because she was a drug addict. And I kept saying, she is not a drug addict. She has not been on drugs for 5 years. So I had done a lot of research into this. She had had blood tests when she was pregnant, and her baby was only a year old, and no sign of drugs. She had recently been to the dentist, and the dental surgeon's gloves had split, and so she wanted her to have a blood test, and that was only weeks before she died. no sign of drugs, absolutely no sign of drugs. But eventually it all came out about these stolen tablets, and that they were not there in her home when we went, first of all. They appeared later. And the coroner said that we were not to say anything that would provoke a Crown Court case about this. We were forbidden to say anything. So my husband had my ex-husband had a dreadful stutter, so I was so cross about all this that I stood up and I filled him in with all the research that I'd done. And but he still said that we were not to take it any further. But the police wanted us to take a private prosecution. And because this had gone on for 13 years, well, longer than that, actually, she'd been on drugs 13 years and then another 5 off, we felt that it was time to give our other 2 children some attention and
Sure.
not take it any further.
Yeah, that's a difficult, yeah, loss of a child. My sister, I mean, it's the loss of a child or a sibling is so difficult. My sister actually passed away at the age of 42 from lung cancer, with no history in the family, no history of smoking. It's just a really tragic and difficult thing. How, what would you, how did you deal with that? And what would be the advice of other people who have to deal with what is obviously a senseless tragedy?
I find it difficult to say how to deal with it, if I'm honest. The things that I have discovered are that a lot of people avoid you. People don't want to bring it up. So people used to cross the road rather than speak to me when it first happened. Or otherwise they'll come and smother you. And I think neither is very helpful. But I think talking about it yourself when you feel able to is helpful. I'm not sure that you ever get over it. I still weep now to this day, and it's many years ago since she died. And I don't think you always expect to outlive your children. And so I don't know that you ever really get over it. But I think I just had to accept that. I think the thing that helped me most of all was Vicky had wanted me to write her story for a magazine, which we did together. And the magazine wanted a photograph taken, and I said, well, it must be from behind. I don't want a full frontal because I don't want her recognised. She insisted on it being a full frontal photograph. And a week before she died, she told me how she was being nagged by people. And she never told me why, but I suspect it was because they'd read this article, she would have shown it around, and they wanted her to be a supplier, a dealer. And I think that when she died, somebody came over to see me and she said, how can you believe this after all the prayers that we put into her life? How can you believe that God is a God of love when this happened? And I said, because, and I said it without thinking, because if Vicky hadn't died then, I believe people would have got her back onto drugs. I think that was their aim in life, and she would have been back then dealing drugs. So to me, it was the better option. That's all I can say. That won't apply to everyone else. I realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, yeah, everybody, yeah, people don't know how to deal. It's very difficult to deal with someone else's tragedy in a healthy way. And yeah, no, it's not easy. And you want to, it's always, everything in life is finding that balance between empathy and, and it's not, it's a, yeah, difficult thing. Well, it's really, really beautiful that you can share this with us. It's beautiful that you're here with us. As we bring this towards the end, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to discuss with us? Any words of wisdom you can share with us? You had such a beautiful breadth and depth of life experience. Let's get you on tape.
Um, no, I think just to finalize what I was saying about Vicky, I run a book club, and one of the books that we read was it was called "When Helping Others Hurts," when helping hurts, and it was about trying to fix things for people when we should be trying to help them to help themselves. And I think that is probably the lesson that I learned out of all of that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
beautiful. When you finally said to her, "You've got to take responsibility," that's when she really changed her life, and
yeah.
that's a common theme. Very good, Marilyn. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you with us. Um, yes, it's really been great. How can people contact you if they obviously they can go through the RD&T website? How can people contact you?
On my own website, which I believe is on the RDT website, is www.menzies or mingis.co.uk, and that contacts me through my website, through my server.
As I said, it's really been an honor and a pleasure, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And we'd like to thank you very much for joining us. This is Dr.
Thank you.
Steve. Thank you. This is Dr. Stephen Cangiano for RD&T TV. Thank you very much.